Hello again, guys. Welcome back. This is Comic Kid here again, and today we will be discussing Batman 3 Jokers by Geoff Johns and Jason Fabok. Now, I do want to be pretty clear pretty early on, this will be a spoiler-heavy review for the series, and I know I only have the first 2 issues pictured here, but I actually was able to get an advance copy of issue 3, which is why I'm discussing it here today. And so I want to stress that if you have not read the final issue and you want to stop this video now and come back to it later. Again, it is brand new, I was able to read it, and since it's arguably one of the biggest Batman stories of the year, you know we have to talk about it. So, again, spoiler-heavy review. Do not watch this video until you have read issue 3 of Batman 3 Jokers, unless of course you don't care about spoilers and want to watch this video anyways. Now, a bit of background. The story, as I mentioned, is written by Geoff Johns and illustrated by Jason Fabok, and it builds off one of the biggest mysteries in the final days of the New 52 era for DC. Effectively, during the Darkseid War, Batman is sitting on the Mobius chair, and he asks it who the identity of the Joker is, and instead of giving him a name, it tells him that there are actually 3 Jokers roaming about the DC universe. Now, from there, fans have been anxiously awaiting the outcome of this mystery, and it is finally here in Batman 3 Jokers. Now, the series actually could have started to come out a lot sooner, but they actually waited until Jason Fabok was completely done with the art before they even solicited it, really. And honestly, I think that was an incredibly smart idea. Fans were really upset with how long it took Doomsday Clock to release, and so for a story that's, arguably equally as massive, it's probably a good thing that they could guarantee that it was coming out on time in this case. Now, this series has been flying off the shelves and received all sorts of great praise, and it definitely deserves the praise it has received, although I do feel as though it's certainly not perfect, and we'll get to that in a minute. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this series. I definitely have plenty of good things to say about it, although I do have a few critiques that I'd say probably hurt it, or maybe even prevented it from being as good as it could have been. And that's mostly what this video today is about, is my general thoughts on Batman 3 Jokers. So we're actually going to start with the negative stuff, get it out of the way, and you guys know I don't like to bash things all that much, although I am going to be honest about my opinion with y'all, and so a few of the negatives that I had towards the series are going to be mentioned in this video. So to start, one of the biggest ones, or I guess complaints that I had, is Barbara Gordon and Jason Todd. Now, this is a dynamic that has never really been explored before, and you really get a great moment of them two, especially in the end of the second issue. But in my opinion, the two don't quite work together, and issue 3 kind of brings them full circle and basically ensures that, it was just kind of a one-time thing. However, I didn't really think it even needed to be a one-time thing. And I'm not the type of person who thinks Barbara Gordon, only has to be with Dick Grayson. That's not it in this case. But Johns really kind of plays on their relationship to their own trauma and, the Joker as being one of the few reasons that they could actually, work together as a romantic couple. And I would disagree with him in that aspect. As the series itself points out, Barbara didn't really let her tragedy define her so much as it was a major part of her life and history, whereas Jason is kind of motivated by his trauma. And because Barbara is so much stronger than Jason in certain areas, I think that, obviously the two can be friends and still continue to work well together, but it seemed a little bit forced for them to have any romantic feelings for each other. But thankfully, the last issue kind of makes it so that, it's not going to be explored much in the future unless some other writer really likes that idea and wants to take it from there. But in the last issue especially, Jason leaves a note for Barbara, effectively professing his love, and he tapes it to the door rather than sliding it under, and it basically, falls off the door. The stickiness of the tape wears off and it gets swept up by a janitor. And I get what he was trying to go for, but that was one of the moments in the book that I thought either could have been better or needed to be fleshed out more, or it didn't quite hit the way I think Johns was hoping it would. And now, one of the other things that kind of rubbed me the wrong way about the series is that certain decisions and justifications from Batman don't quite make sense. For starters, whenever he's talking with Jason, they kind of go through their roundabout, oh, you're going about justice the wrong way, and it's kind of the same argument we've all heard before. But in the first issue especially, Batman leaves Jason alone with Barbara and one of the Jokers, and just kind of expects everything to be perfectly fine just because Barbara's there. But for, such a loose cannon as Jason is, Batman's suddenly surprised when he learns that Jason actually kills the first Joker in this series. And for someone that Geoff Johns himself has claimed to be the second smartest human in the DC universe, it seems like a pretty obvious move that you wouldn't leave the loose cannons like Jason in a room with the person who potentially, put him in the grave. And then one of the other big things that didn't quite make sense to me is at the end of the series, in the final issue, Batman reveals to Alfred that he does in fact know the Joker's real name. And, we the readers are not given it, but we are told that Batman does know it. And it is specifically the name of the Killing Joke Joker, and Batman kind of reveals how he learned it, but it still doesn't quite make sense. Essentially, readers learn that Batman put Joker's wife and unborn child into protective custody for the sake of getting them out of there. Now, aside from the timeline issues that kind of presents with the Killing Joke itself, it does raise the question as to if Batman knew around the Killing Joke that the Joker was whoever. Why would he ask the Mobius chair in Darkseid War if he already knew? Obviously, that's not the biggest deal ever, but for something that was written by Geoff Johns, you'd think he'd kind of be able to connect those two a little bit better. That just seems like one of the more blatantly obvious mysteries. Batman wouldn't have asked the chair if he didn't already know, clearly. With that in mind, it could be said that because the book does read more like a standalone, that's why, and that's just a little bit of extra information for the readers themselves who might not have read Darkseid War, because the book doesn't really mention it at all. Those who have read Darkseid War are kind of familiar with the setup of this story, but people who just, grab it from issue 1 might not have that same type of setup, so that might be why he chose to end it the way he did. Now, I'm sure some people would probably disagree with me on this next point, but unfortunately the book does feel very forgettable just because it doesn't answer any of these questions about the three Jokers. You get the basic plot that there have been 3 of them practically since the beginning, and you in an effort to answer some of these questions, part of the fun of Joker as a character is all the mystery behind him and his backstory. And so you don't want all the answers to these questions, but by the time the story begins and ends, you're kind of back to square one. You have one Joker going forward. Obviously, it's going to be the worst of the bunch. You also don't really, care which one was which, and it could have been one of them the whole time. I'm not trying to say it wasn't a good story and that it didn't introduce some cool ideas here, but we're kind of back to square one now, where we have one Joker again, and it's a whole new dynamic for him and Batman, and so it just kind of goes full circle in that aspect. And while I'm glad that it didn't answer every single question that readers had, I do think it would have been like kind of a bold move to at least name one of the Jokers, and whether they're someone important or not, like maybe at least name one of them. I don't know, it just felt very safe, and it does kind of feel like we're back to square one. And then one of my last big major cons, as I kind of mentioned earlier, the story really misses out on a great opportunity for the Batman and Red Hood dynamic. That said, it does play off the two's relationship very well. It's just, it could have really driven some more points home, and this would have been a great chance for Jason to kind of really grow as a character. Scott Lobdell is also about to end his run on Red Hood, and so, this would be a great time for them to push Jason in one direction or another. And they don't really do any of that. Everyone is, again, kind of back to square one, and Jason's still Red Hood, and he's still gonna be the brooding kind of black sheep of the Bat family. And so I just felt like they could have done a little bit more between those two to really either solidify the two's relationship or just give Jason some much more streamlined character development, I guess. And I'm not trying to say that he's not a complex character by any means, but they tease an idea of him actually becoming a full-fledged hero, and I kind of would have liked to see them stick to that one way or the other. But that is really all the negative stuff that I had to say about the book. So, to get into the pros, everything that I liked about it. And as I already mentioned, it doesn't answer every question. Like I said, the whole point of the Joker and why he's so much fun and such a insanely popular villain is that we don't know a whole lot about his backstory. That's something the movie did very well, was it portrayed it as simply just a possibility, and you're still not given his real name, and so on and so forth. And even though we don't get Joker's real name in this story, it's still good to have that sense of mystery of the character. Just because there are three of them and kind of what they're doing and how there came to be three of them doesn't mean that the series takes all the fun out of the Joker. And it really did a good job of leaving what's great about Joker himself in there. One of the other major positives is the smaller character moments, particularly in issue 2 when Batman goes to visit Joe Chill in his cell, and his voice catches, that is some excellent and just truly phenomenal characterization in my opinion. All the dialogue I felt flowed really naturally, and seeing Jason and Barbara throughout these situations as well, all the little character moments that they had truly were they just definitely stood out throughout the series. With that said, I do also think it helps that it's a standalone story. Now, it is technically canon. It's kind of like the Killing Joke, where certain elements in the timeline aren't exact, but it is still canon with the rest of the DC universe. You just don't know exactly when it's taking place. But Batgirl and Red Hood are both in some pretty atypical outfits, especially given what they're wearing in their solo titles now. And so that is one of the bigger indicators that it takes place outside of the general canon of the DC universe, but they're going to talk about stuff like this in future storylines. But timeline and continuity aside, this story does have a beginning, middle, and end. You don't need to read anything before it, except for probably the Killing Joke. It does help to know some key moments in Joker history as well, but for the most part, if you know anything about the character, then you're pretty good to go. You should have no issues just jumping right into this series. And not only is it well written overall, but it is incredibly well illustrated. Fabak absolutely crushed it in this series. It is easily some of his best work I've ever seen. And if I'm not mistaken, he's actually the protege of David Finch. and you can actually see some similarities in like how they detail and shade things, but boy does Fabak just truly excel throughout this series. It's no wonder they had him design an entire line of action figures. Like, it's his artwork is just absolutely stellar. From his Batman to his Batgirl to his Red Hood, everyone looks different. Bruce just doesn't look like a slightly older Jason, and even the Jokers themselves have these small little details despite looking so similar that you can just tell that they're different people altogether. So bravo to Fabak for delivering one of the best drawn books of the year, in my opinion. Now, to kind of circle back to the writing a little bit, one of the other major pluses is that it is not entirely centered on Batman. While I do think the overall mystery of the series could have been a bit stronger, the fact that it incorporates Batman, Barbara, and Jason on top of the Jokers so well, like no one feels like they got gypped. Everyone feels like they had their specific purpose in the story. And given that Barbara and Jason especially have also been so greatly affected by the Joker, it's really nice to see this series focus on them too as well. They totally could have made it all about Batman. They totally could have pulled Barbara and Jason out of there or involved the entirety of the Bat family. But it really does a great job of hitting home those more personal elements and details by involving those two, on top of Batman, of course. With that in mind, this idea of like 3 Batmen, the 3 members of the Bat family, kind of clashing against 3 Jokers in a way that they're like evenly matched, like I really thought that was a cool dynamic. Loved to see all of that. Now, to get into what is probably my biggest positive for the series overall, and that is the Batman and Joe Chill dynamic. Now, Joe Chill is reintroduced in book 2 of the series and really kind of rounded out throughout the last issue, but it really answers like where he's been this whole time and what's going on with him and just kind of how he feels about Batman and what he did to Bruce Wayne and so on. And what really stands out about Joe Chill in this series is just this is where the new material comes from. This is really where Johns is introducing some new concepts and ideas. And eventually he uses it to build on the Joker even further, but I'll get to that in a second. Now, as everyone knows, Batman has always been driven by the murder of his parents, which was, directly caused by Joe Chill. And they don't make any excuses for Chill as a character, but they do show that he has regret. And seeing him and Batman interact, given that he knows Bruce Wayne is Batman and he knows what he did and he knows what he took from not only Bruce Wayne but all of Gotham, just made him a much greater character overall, in my opinion. Furthermore, given that Joker actually kind of heals Batman in this sense, as Joker himself later goes on to explain, now Joker himself can be the number one problem and burden in Batman's entire life. He makes the point that because his parents were murdered and because that was why he became Batman, that Joker could never really be the number one source of Batman's pain. Well, by healing him in this aspect and allowing him closure and forgiveness with Joe Chill and kind of bringing that chapter in Bruce Wayne's life to a close, Joker can finally become the biggest problem in Batman's entire life. And I thought that was a really interesting thing for Johns to explore there. Essentially, it's not even about the 3 Jokers, it's just another great story about how a singular Joker continues to just have a truly massive and personal impact on Batman's life as a whole. And so, hands down, that is what I would say is the biggest strength in Batman 3 Jokers, and there are a lot of strengths in them. Overall, I really enjoyed the series. I would definitely encourage you guys to check it out. Now, do I think it will live up to the same kind of defining stuff as The Killing Joke? No, but I do think it'll be close. I do imagine a lot of people are going to consider this to be an essential Batman read, at the moment, it's definitely popular. I'd say one would be hard-pressed to not at least be intrigued by the ideas introduced in this series. If I were to rate it, I'd give it a solid A-. The strengths are really strong and the weaknesses are few, and while I do have certain gripes with it, it's definitely not enough to drag the overall series down. But again, that is just my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you guys thought of Batman 3 Jokers down in the comments section below. Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button, and let me know if you guys want me to talk about some more direct series that are currently coming out. I go to the comic shop all the time, I practically live there, and I'm always reading stuff, so if you want some insight on some more current storylines, just let me know down in the comments section below. Thanks, and I will see you guys again next week.